Okay, today we are going to add some entourage onto our model, which is kind of the bits and bobs that you see around a project, equipment, furnishings, people, even some decoration, and we'll also add the landscape. So let's start by adding the fins to these columns. And here's our beautiful gas station, the photo. If you look here on one side, it looks like there's two kind of big wide fins and maybe some smaller ones. Maybe they look like they might just be discs around the column. And with this one, these look like they're just discs on this side of the canopy. So let's try and create that. And the big question you always have to ask yourself whenever you're creating either a mass or a component in place is, what reference plane do I want to work on? What makes the most sense? If you're creating a custom ceiling, you might want to actually set the reference plane to the ceiling. And if you're wanting to draw on, say, a vertical surface, you can actually set your reference plane, your work plane, excuse me, to really any plane that you can pick in Revit. There are named planes, and if you draw a reference plane, you can name the reference plane whatever you want and then pick it here from the menu. You can also pick a plane, or you can pick a line that's on a plane. We don't really have a lot of lines here. But if we choose pick a plane and OK, you'll see that it will highlight different planes if I wanted to work on those. Now, I think this actually might be easiest to draw in plan and just move it right up, rather than mess around with trying to get it right in the ceiling view. So here I am in plan view. And by the way, when you are navigating plans, and this is especially true if your mouse has broken or you've lost it, be aware that most views have these steering wheels. If I click on this 2D steering wheel here, you'll see that it has the basic zoom controls. You can use swipe motions on your touchpad, but these are actually kind of handy. Zooming, panning, especially if you don't have your mouse. And there's also fit to window, where it just kind of squeezes everything that it can find into the view that you can see. And if that's not enough view control for you, you should learn the Revit keyboard shortcuts. And I posted this to our section of Canvas. And there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts. They are generally 2 keystrokes or a function key, which on your typical laptop, you actually have to hold down the function key and then type F8 or F6 or whatever it is. But anyway, and a lot of these should be familiar to you if you're used to AutoCAD, zoom windows and that kind of thing, zoom in region, zoom in, zoom out, zoom all to fit. And these are great if you're like stuck and you have actually no idea where you are, or if you import some object and it ends up in outer space somewhere and you have to find it. If you zoom out to everything, you'll be able to find it. And most of these are also in this little kind of zoom submenu below the 2D steering wheel. So for example, if you zoom into a region, it should allow you to kind of zoom into a box, which didn't actually do that. And there's all sorts of other zooms that you can use. But anyway, the scroll wheel works real well too. Okay, to make these fins, after all that digression, we're going to use a component in place, just like we did for the base. So I'll choose model in place and choose column, and we can call it fins, west side perhaps, because we're going to have different fins on the east side. And I'll click OK. And when you draw these objects inside a family, if you remember, there are all these standard shapes inside a family. And so for us, it's a pretty simple shape. It's an extrusion. I'll just freehand it with some lines here. Not exactly sure how big it is. That actually looks a little on the small side, but let's draw it symmetrically at first, and then we can expand it. And again, drawing using Revit's drawing tools, super handy. and quite easy. There's a lot of tools you can use. Just nudging allows you to change the size of these objects. And we'll take a guess as to the about size. Probably a little bit bigger than a foot is what I'd have to guess. And these guys are probably closer in here. Maybe we'll make it 1'7". There we go. Something like that. 1'6" maybe. I don't know. I can't decide. Anyway, when you are making an extrusion, if you click on the properties menu with nothing selected, this will tell you the dimension of the extrusion, and I don't think it's 2'6" thick. I'm going to guess it's probably 1 inch thick, if at all. Okay, so we click OK, and we're done. Wait, where did it go? No. So I haven't finished editing the component because there's multiple fins, but let's solve this mystery first. Where did it go? Well, I'll tell you where it went. Let's look at the west elevation. I think that's the right one. Oh, yeah, there it is. And there it is in plan. Okay, it's actually stuck inside the floor. And now we can just use the move tool and move it up into position. Now, you might say, why doesn't it move? Watch what happens when I try to move it. No matter what happens, it will not go up. Okay, and the reason is this object, when you create it, if I can get it selected here, it has a special feature, which is a work plane. Whatever plane you draw these on, they are associated with that work plane. So you have to dissociate this object from the plane to move it more easily. Now, I before I do that, I will say, yes, you can absolutely stretch this guy up and just make it look right. But I spent all that effort making it exactly 1 inch, and I'm going to stick with that. So in that case, let me dissociate it from the work plane. And now I can just use my handy-dandy move tool, and I'll move this guy up. And all of the, or most of the handy-dandy tools should work in this situation. So I'll move this up maybe 6 inches, and then I'll copy it down another 6 inches here. I'm getting too many references. I'll copy this guy down 6 inches. Okay. Now this bottom one, if I remember from the picture, this is actually just 2 circles. So I'm going to edit this guy by double clicking on it. And when I do that, it says, well, you know what? You can't work on it in this reference plane. So you'll want to choose a view where you can see both the columns and the fins and make sure they're in the right position. It doesn't look right. So let's choose the ground floor plan. I'll choose open view. And here we are. And oh, yes, indeed, these look like a bunch of googly eyes. So we need to push these up a little bit. And you can see they're 9 inches in diameter. That's going to be handy. In fact, I'm going to copy this sketch, Control-C, copy it to the clipboard so that I can use it when I create the ones on the other side. So, and you can see I kind of messed up the other ones too. Somehow I thought I was drawing them in the right position, but you never know. So with these guys, again, come to your ground floor plan view and fix them just by nudging. I must have gotten over enthusiastic about nudging these guys. And oh yeah, and the top one is off too. So let's edit that guy. And again, each of these, because we are kind of trying to make it look correct, without, very specific measurements, we are going to basically have to, look at them, make an evaluation, and then move them around. I think that's about the right size, though. Drawing the site, in this case, is actually pretty easy. And the reason is because it's basically all kind of concrete and asphalt. Our adjacent site is just a flat concrete slab, driveway, and there's some planters. There's some fencing around it, but the sidewalk, of course, is also concrete, and there's some roadways nearby. Now, all of these elements are what are known as hardscaping, or hardscaping, as opposed to the softer landscape elements, plantings, trees, that kind of stuff. And because we're planning to render this in Lumion, we generally want to make these hardscape elements out of Revit families of one type or another. Floors are probably the easiest way, although we can make them out of masses as well. And to get the dimensions, if you remember, we did this in Morpholio Trace. We actually kind of figured out how big the site is. It's roughly 80 feet square. So that's a pretty good point of departure. Then we can add in all the other elements. So here I am in site plan, and you can absolutely make these objects out of masses. And masses, if you remember mass in place here on this tool, are great if you have very irregularly shaped objects, particularly things which are organic. You have a lot more control. Or if you want to build around a very specific thing, make a built-in seat around a column, for example. But the disadvantage of masses is they don't play well with other features of Revit, including things like the visibility and graphic overrides menu, which can turn on and off elements by their category, by their type. So let's do a component in place, and I'll just choose model in place, and we'll do a site component. That way all the site objects, one, they end up kind of grouped together, which is handy dandy, but also we can turn them on and off using the visibility and graphic overrides menu. So, okay, like I said, the site was basically 80 feet square. Well, you know, how hard is that to draw? We can just draw 80 feet square. Revit is awfully good at this kind of stuff. And I left about a 2-foot end here. It was short about 2 feet. So that gives you an arc length of about 2 feet, or a diameter, radius, whatever that is. I don't even know. And I'll make it go past a little bit just for the style points here. So that's the path. I'll click the checkbox. And now what you'll see is this weird dashed line. That is a reference plane that I can draw on. And I just need to find a view that I can draw it in, and a 3D view works just fine. So if you come here, it's actually kind of handy. You can see the reference plane is always perpendicular to whatever the first segment was that you drew. So if I go, I'll make this the front view here. So you can see, we can kind of see our site slab on edge. And this guy, the sidewalk is basically coplanar, the top of the sidewalk, with the site. So the shape that I want for the sidewalk, again, I'll just go and I need to edit this profile that I've created. So choose Edit Profile. And automatically you are working in the reference plane that I mentioned. So even though it's a little confusing to look at, we are in that reference plane. And if I had to guess, that looks like a pretty wide sidewalk. So it's about 6 feet, I'd have to guess. So we can go out, we can type in 6 feet. That brings it up. It does look pretty long, but it's pretty skinny. That's fine. Anyway, and then we want to draw the profile of the curb, which has kind of a rounded edge to it. So I'll just draw it up about 3 inches. And I'll give myself a couple of line segments as reference here so that I can draw in a little arc to round that corner, kind of a 1-inch round. That's probably a little generous, but it makes it a little more visible. So this gives me a total of a 4-inch curb, which it occurs to me I didn't make the rest of my curb, the rest of my landscape 4 inches, so I do need to do that. So here's my curb. It's about 6 feet with that rounded edge. And let me finish that mass. And here we go. We can see that we now have this mass running around the edge of our landscape. Let me double click on this guy and change the height of this extrusion to 4 inches. I think I talked about it, but I didn't actually do it. And now you should see that these two are coplanar. And of course, this view, the landscape is actually down. Let me finish that model. The entire landscape component should actually be down 4 inches below the adjacent landscape. So let me go to a view where I can move that down. And I'll just move it down 4 inches, except that it's locked to the fucking reference plane. God damn it. Now, looking at the site view here, it does look like there's kind of a double curb here, that there's a low bush, looks like on either side, and then the other sides, are basically just a fence. So there may or may not be a curb there, but let's just draw it with the planters on either side and take it from there. Now, I'm not going to go through the process of drawing a sweep again, step by step for you, but just needless to say, I drew a sweep. Here is the path for the sweep. It's kind of about a 3-foot wide planter. And I'm going to give myself a profile. That's kind of a slice of bread profile here. Whoa, come on. The profile's kind of like a slice of bread shape, about a 3-inch, roughly a 3-inch square. And I eased the edge of it just so it'd give it a nice look. And there you go. There's your planter. Yeah, you know, that actually does look a little, well, I think that's okay. Anyway, I made this offset just a little bit from the edge. I think it actually does kind of go right up to the edge. Nice part about it being a component is that you can copy it, right? I can either finish this, which maybe I'll do that, and I'll make a copy of this component. I could even, maybe let's do this. Let's mirror it to the opposite of the site. So that way we have two that are exactly the same. And then if I come in and I'm like, oh, you know what, this should be a little longer and I didn't really do that, I can come in and stretch this one and then, like magic, hit check a whole bunch of times and they both should change. Or at least in theory, they both should change. And you might be saying, hey, aren't you forgetting the plants? Well, the plants basically we are going to add in Lumion. I could add plants here, but probably if I were to add plants so that they show up correctly on the floor plan, I would just add them as 2D components, like AutoCAD type components, so that they don't mess up the rendering. And let's finish out the curbs here. There's these planters on either end, but I believe there are two curbs here, and this is kind of where people would drive through. So let's add those curbs, but boy, that's a lot of work to draw those curbs from scratch. Why not just copy these guys and adapt them? Now, I find this to be the fastest method. If you already have something, why not copy it? And I click the copy tool. You can also hold down the control key and click and drag, and that makes a copy of an element too. So you can quickly make copies of elements, and I'm just going to keep double clicking on this until I get to the path. Oops. There we go. We've got the purple path, and I'm going to delete the most of it. Just delete these guys. And if I remember correctly, the profile is on this segment. So you can't delete that segment, but you absolutely can delete everything else. I'll just drag this down roughly perpendicular to the edge of the building here. And click the checkbox, and now I have myself a lovely curb on this side of the building. Oops, I guess I made a couple of copies here. Oh no, there we go. Okay, so finish the model. So there's my extra curb, and like I did before, I can mirror that guy onto the opposite side of the site. So now we have these two curbs on either side that we can place our fence on. So the easiest way to create a fence, it's a repeated semi-element made up of lots of smaller bits and pieces, is to use a railing. That's kind of Revit's tool for it. So click railing here, and I guess I clicked that a little fast. Railings, you can place them on a stair or a ramp. They can be hosted. They can even be hosted by floors, which is great if you have a floor that you're not sure the height of it yet. You can host that railing on the floor component, and it'll go up and down as you kind of change your mind about the design. I'm just going to sketch it on the ground for now, and I'll just follow the outside here, and this will probably be close enough. There we go. Make sure they line up with each other. There we go. And let's see how far. Oh yeah, I was way off here. I kind of want to put this in the middle of the curb. So you see how there's the curb. Oh wow, I guess I totally missed the middle line here. That's what you get for trying to draw zoomed way out. I find that that extra scroll, it's a lot of work to scroll that extra tiny little bit. But you see how much more precise I can be. I can zoom in and say, oh, that's that's off by 1/4 of an inch. I can nudge that guy exactly right. Anyway, so there's the path of my railing and the sketch of my railing. Now, what kind of railing is it? Revit does not have a lot of basic railings. These handrails and guardrails, right? So, and here, we'll just put it on the guardrail so you can see what it looks like. And it does not look like what we have on our site. It looks kind of like a pipe rail guardrail. So how do we get a better railing? Well, railings are notoriously complicated, and so we don't want to mess with them if we don't have to. Wouldn't it be nice if Revit gave you a model with lots of railings in them that you could copy and paste right into your drawing? And oh, guess what? They do. It's this drawing here, which is posted to Canvas, and it's actually called Railing Samples. So somebody was up late coming up with that name, and you can see there's actually some handy dandy railings. And you know, again, if you followed along last semester, you know that we saw quite a few of these. Like this is just a handrail without the guardrail part. This is the guardrail without the handrail. This is a residential thingamabob, but anyway, down here there's a fence, and this one is probably fine for our purposes, especially if we decide we want to change it. So all you have to do, you basically can just copy, Control C. I'm going to go into this model and Control V to paste it in, and it might give me an error message, and it says, where do you want to place it? It actually doesn't really matter where you place it. Once you've gotten to that point where it's placed in your model, there it is. It's now a family loaded in, and I can just select this railing, and this should be a new type called fence, which cleverly is just what we want. And I'll do that all again to add in a little piece of fence down here at the bottom. I'll leave the rest open. And, you know, when I was drawing the second half, the second side, I realized, oh, I didn't really curve this corner. Well, again, beauty of Revit objects is you can edit them after the fact. So in this case, I'm just going to edit this path and make a rounded edge here. And I should do this on all of them. And that way my fence kind of gives me a rounded look. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Hopefully that kind of works. Sometimes, obviously, if it's like a glass panel, you can't do a rounded edge in a glass paneled fence, so the whole thing will go kitty wumpus. But absolutely for this fence type, it does seem to be working just fine. And there's our beautiful building with its lovely enclosure. Oh wait, I just realized there's a problem. This fence, you see how it actually starts on the ground, but this curb, I made it 3 inches tall. So what I want to do is make all these railings go up 3 inches. And of course, Revit does have an easy way. Believe it or not, some things are easy. I can select all instances of this railing by just right-clicking on it and choose in entire project. Could be just visible in this view, but I'm going to go to the entire project. I mean, I know there's only 2, but anyway, and then I can just change the base offset to 3 inches. And when I do that, it will change this front one and the back one as well. So they should all sit on top of the curb properly now. Now, if you look at this building, you'll see there's a lot of stuff, a lot of little bits and pieces around this building. Flower pots, garbage cans, oil barrels, and these old style gas pumps. Now, we are almost certainly not going to find these exact objects, but, and for the sake of this project, you don't necessarily have to keep them when we go on to design, but it is nice to have some of them in here, just for the kind of flavor, the historic flavor. And we are probably not going to find these in Revit City. You absolutely can search in Revit City and knock yourself out. But I wanted to show you a different way to bring in objects. Again, you probably have seen this before, and that's my old friend SketchUp. Now, I actually have the full version of SketchUp, the Pro version, so I don't need to use the web-based version, but I figured a lot of you may have just the free version. And that's okay too, because you still have access to the 3D warehouse. I love the 3D warehouse. The model quality is a little inconsistent, but absolutely you get a lot of models in here that are super handy. You just have to be careful when you load them in that you check to see how well they work. I couldn't find a Richfield one, but there are some other nice ones. Golf is actually very, very nice, very Boston here. Let's try this Sinclair one. Now, what I would recommend is downloading it, and then you can download it right into your model. Okay, and often what you'll find is, this is typical of SketchUp, you bring in an object and that's a little bigger than I was hoping, right? SketchUp has a fun feature where if you edit the component that you bring in, just double click on it so you see how everything... And when I'm editing this, I could just use the old tape measure and measure it, see what we come up with, which is 71 feet. But it's almost certainly probably something more like 7 feet. So if I do that, it will resize the active component. So just make sure you're inside the component to do that. Another thing, noticing that that was pretty close to the actual, kind of 1/12. Another thing you can do, I'm just going to delete these references here. I'm not sure what they're doing. Is you can actually scale it by a factor of 1/12. Just use the scale tool. Click on one side and start moving it down, but then you can type in, I believe 1/12 is 0.083. You can't type in a fraction, I'm afraid. And we'll probably end up with basically the same dimension as before, but that 1/12 dimension, that is actually kind of a magic number. That looks about, well, honestly, that looks a little short to me. The handle probably is a little higher, so let's make it a little bit taller. That's what I'm guessing from the photos. Now let's delete this guy here because we don't need him in our model. Just select him and hit delete. It is not a bad idea to move this model at the intersection of the X, Y, and Z axes. It just does make it a little easier when you put it into Revit. I'm going to save it, and it will ask you if you want to purge, and you do. Definitely anything you download off of 3D Warehouse, you want to purge. Then you do have to download it onto your computer because this just saves it onto your online service here from Trimble. So just download the SKP file. Now, importing objects from outside Revit into Revit poses a couple of questions you want to ask yourself. Now, I absolutely could just come over here and import CAD. Of course, it wants to save the project. Import CAD, choose the old gas pump, and absolutely go. What I like to do is have manual center of the model and import it this way. Now, but before I do that, let me talk about why I'm not going to do that. And the reason is when you import it this way, it just sits in the model. It's a little harder to update the model. And this is, in our case, we may want to repaint this model. The only way we can kind of change or divide up the paint colors is in SketchUp. We can modify the paint colors that are on there now, change them in Lumion, but if we want to divide them or change them in some way that involves changing the geometry, we need that SketchUp file, in which case we can link CAD. And if we do that, the object will come in. Again, I'm just going to choose from manual center, level ground floor, and here is the object that we're talking about. And now if I make changes to it on that same insert menu, what you'll see is a manage links button. Just click on that, and there's a number of different things that you can have in here, but the old gas pump, if I were to change it, there's an option to reload it from the file. Revit isn't real good about doing it automatically. But doing it this way works really well. And it behaves like other Revit components. I can change its dimension, for example. It should sit up 4 inches from the ground. So I'll just have that offset, and there you go. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the really kind of official correct way to do this, to import these outer objects from outside of Revit, and that's really to put them in their own family. And to do this, you have to go to the File menu, New, and create a new family. And this way, just like we did before with the fins on the columns, if we bring it into the correct kind of family, it'll behave properly when we try to hide it by category, for example. So I'm going to choose Entourage and click Open. Entourage is basically stuff. and then you can insert that CAD file right into this model. We'll choose old gas pump again, click this. We'll go and place it right in the middle. And like any family, if you go and you take a look at this, you can see the back and the front and et cetera, et cetera. It's giving me a warning that something is wrong with the geometry, that it doesn't like, and that happens sometimes. And if that does happen, well, then go back to the other method. But anyway, we would then save this file and load it into the project. And when we do, it behaves just like the other one. There we go. We can place it. We can select it and modify its offset and everything like that. So it behaves properly. And I do believe that if you go to the Insert menu and you check your Manage Links, that this old gas pump will show up properly. Lastly, objects that you do bring in from SketchUp, they do behave a little funny sometimes. Like us all, they're a little funny. And for example, SketchUp objects, they often show up on your ceiling plan. Oh yeah, there's one of them, but not the other. So of course you would want to hide the entire category. Also, if objects are showing up in the ceiling that shouldn't be, using the visibility and graphic overrides is absolutely a way that you can find these objects. In this case, imported categories. If you look here, these are where the SketchUp models are. And the one that I imported directly, oldgaspump.skp, I can hide that. And I can import the one that's imported in the family. I can hide it this way rather than hiding the family. It kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And for all of you, I'm not going to do this ad infinitum here, but I would like you all to, in addition to the gas pumps, find a gas pump you like. I'd like you to have 4 other kind of fun Art Deco-y gas station things. Coca-Cola bottle dispensers, even flower pots are fine, Pennzoil display, fire hose, that sort of thing, even just an oil barrel. You should be able to find those either on Revit City or on the 3D warehouse and bring them into your model and scatter them about the project. They don't have to be exactly the way these are. This hose hanger, you can have a slightly different hose if you want. And some of the things that are on here, for example, these cool kind of teardrop light fixtures, you may actually find those on Revit City. Those would be good ones to place in your model. The last little bit of modeling that I'd like to do is adding some text here. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. First of all, finding this font is going to be lots of fun, won't it? Let's see what we can do. I'm going to try this new thing they just invented. It's called the Internet, and see if I can track down a free Art Deco style font. And of course, there's a web page called 1001 Fonts. There are actually many web pages with free fonts out there, and I searched for Art Deco fonts. I'm not going to take you through how to search for things on the internet. I think you're probably okay. And actually, there's a lot of really fun ones on here. But here's one that I happen to like, Rialto. And the big thing with fonts in Revit is they do have to be TTF, true type fonts. So make sure that whatever you get is not just a PostScript font, but a true type font. And you can download that puppy onto your computer. And here they are in my downloads folder. And you will usually see the file name that says TTF, true type font. So what do you do with that true type font to get it to show up in Revit? It's actually surprisingly easy for something Windows, which is not always the easiest operating system to manage. And what you do, you go to this PC, and you should be able to, I'll go on the left here, there's Windows C drive. And if you go on that C drive, there's a little folder, and I'm just clicking this little right arrow here. There should be a folder for Windows, okay? And then in the Windows folder, there's another folder with all of your fonts. And if I click on it, you can actually see what they all look like. And how fun is that? Anyway, this folder is where you want to drag all of any fonts that you download. So again, go to the Windows and go to fonts. Here's the fonts. And what you can do, if I click on downloads on the left, what's in downloads shows up in the file explorer. And then I can just go down wherever fonts is. Oh, there we go. It's going a little fast. I'll go down to fonts and literally just drag it into the fonts folder. How easy is that? So putting 3D text in a model couldn't be easier. The only trick is you have to tell Revit where you want the text to go because it will go on whatever your current work plane is. So there's this cool set work plane button, and I'll just click that set work plane. And like we saw before, I can pick a plane, and I will pick this plane right here. Now, when I do my 3D text, and I'll type in rich field, there we go. And okay, it should go right onto that surface. And of course, it's a parametric object, so let's make it not stick out so much. Maybe half an inch, 0.5 is plenty. And once you have selected this, you change the height. You do have to edit the type in order to change the font. And like I mentioned, whenever you're doing something, you're changing a system family. To make a new family member, let's duplicate this guy and we'll call the new font, what was it, Ritzy, I believe? No, Rialto. Yeah, Rialto, click OK, and click OK. And let's see if that is the right way to go here. Oh, and that's probably because I hit cancel instead of actually choosing the correct font here. Let's go down to Rialto. Let me just start typing Rialto. There we go. And apply and OK. And let's see. That might actually be a wee bit big. So again, got to come in here and edit type. And let's make this 1'8" maybe. Let's see if that makes it. Oh, not 2'8". No. 1'8" is probably plenty. Apply and OK. And yeah, that's looking about right. Okay, and I can copy this guy and swing around. I just copied it to the clipboard. I'm going to pick a new work plane. Whoops. Sorry, I'm going to set my current work plane by picking the opposite side. Again, grabbing the edge of the surface. And now I'll just paste in my new rich field that I copied to the clipboard from the other side and nudge it into position. And maybe it's a little small. I'll have to study the image on that. And that's how we can get the sign on the opposite side. Now, an alternative to doing 3D text, and 3D text is fine and you can do it for all the signs, but a fancier method is using Adobe to find a font. Because Adobe is really good at these sorts of graphics things. And I went to fonts.adobe.com, logged in with my account, and lo and behold, there are all these fonts. I just searched for Art Deco, and here's a nice one. And basically, if you find one you like, artdeco.mn, Art Deco MN, I'm not sure, Minnesota, I guess. All you have to do is click the Add Family button. You see how each of these have an Add Family? Now, I already have it in mine, because I already added it in. Because I was trying to see if I could find a good one. And the beauty of that is now I could go to any of my Adobe programs and that font should be there. So here I am in Adobe Illustrator. I'm not going to go over how to make things in Adobe Illustrator, but I will say that I can make text. That's probably not any mystery to you, and you can change the font size, but you can change the font. And if we scroll down in the list here, you should see Art Deco MN, the one that we loaded off of the web page. I'm just going to make this a wee bit bigger so that it kind of fills the white area here. I can also adjust the white area so that it kind of looks roughly the same proportion as the image. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're getting pretty close. Again, I may decide later on when I make some design changes that I want this to look differently. But in the meantime, here we go. I've got my lube oil change sign in such a beautiful font, and I can just export this as a file that Revit can read. So choose File, Export, Export As. So back here in Revit, you just go to the Insert menu, and decal is the trick, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but anyway, I'll make myself a new decal. I'll just call it new decal, and swap out the image for the signage image that I created. You can even change some of the parameters of the image here, make it maybe not quite so glossy. High gloss seems a little exaggerated. Anyway, then click OK, and literally your mouse cursor should give you a preview of where it's going to go, just depending on where you find your cursor. So I clicked on this wall, and oh, apparently maybe I didn't click on that wall. Maybe I thought I was going to click on that wall. There we go. I clicked on that wall, and here's the decal. And the cool thing about decals is that they can be resized pretty easily, unlike materials where there's a lot more steps. Now you might say, wouldn't it be nice if I could see what that looks like? And you can. If you just go to textures and turn that on, or maybe realistic. Let's try realistic. And that should render what the decal looks like. And there it is. Now, we will want to make sure that this looks kind of like what we want it to look like, and adjust the size and the position. And, you know, maybe we need to go back to Illustrator and change it so it's a little more centered. It looks a little high to me. But you can see that that actually is pretty convincing. You know, it actually really does look like the sign in the project. Now, if your sign kind of looked like this, maybe it's because you didn't accidentally delete your fascia from the edge of your roof like I did. So I was placing my decal right on basically a flat fascia, which decals will only display on top of a surface. So I need to insert a surface here. I'll just do a mass in place. One trick with mass in place is, and I'll just call it mass. You do need to tell Revit where you're drawing. So I'm going to click the Set Reference Work Plane button, and I'll just click on one of these outer faces here. And now I can draw a rectangle. I'll make it a little bigger. And with masses like this, you draw some outline, and then you choose Create Form, and it kind of makes an extrusion. We don't really need much of the extrusion. In fact, we can come in here and maybe just make this, oh, I don't know, 1/2 inch. So basically kind of like a sheet of plywood. And then we can take our misplaced, oh, let's finish that mass. I'll take our misplaced decal, copy, Control X to delete, and then Control V to paste it in. And now it should recognize the mass. And if your mass wasn't sticking out quite far enough, you make sure that you can use these grippers here to push it out a little farther. Now my decal should go on it no problem. And I can center the decal as needed on this wall. And the decal will stretch proportionally. And the mass, I can just stretch it down to fit the kind of width of the decal. In fact, it can even go kind of behind it a little bit. And you might want to group together the mass and the sign, the decal, so that they move together if you have to kind of nudge them around. So the last thing I'd like to do is apply paint to all the different surfaces of the model. And who doesn't love the paint bucket? That's probably the easiest way to go, and or at least for some surfaces. And the advantage of the paint bucket is if you have created a paint in your project, and it doesn't have to be paint, it can be concrete, as you see here, you can just choose it and dump the paint right away. Now, in this case, I want to make one for the sidewalk, and just to show you how you can modify materials in the materials browser. So I'm going to duplicate this material, and I'll call it concrete sidewalk. And when you have a material, if you look up here, if it's using something from the materials library, an asset it's called, it will have the name here, exposed aggregate. Well, one thing you'll notice is that I have that same exposed aggregate on this other material. I did duplicate it so it has a 1 next to it, so it actually isn't this exact same one, but this is often why when you change one material and a whole bunch change, because you've duplicated it but you're accidentally using the same darn asset. So let's replace the asset, go to the asset library. And if you remember, hopefully, you always go to the appearance library. That's where the Autodesk's best standard materials are. And of course, here's concrete. Let's just go with concrete. And we could even go with cast in place. There's a number of different options: formwork, exposed, gray, flat gray. And if you're like, yeah, I don't really know what we're talking about here, you could actually make these much larger images. In fact, here, that was small. If I make them really big, you can really get a sense of what these images look like. And obviously choose one that is going to make sense for you. There's probably one here that's brushed. Let's see if we can find a brushed one. And I'll just search in here and nothing happens. Oh, except I guess we should type in concrete. See if anything comes up with brushed concrete. That's kind of what they do with their typical sidewalk. If not, we'll just use one of the concrete ones that looks pretty good. I didn't see one in there, so I'll just use this sandblasted one. And again, taking advantage of these, what Revit has to offer, you can make these previews a little bit bigger. You can add things like tint to really make these materials nice. Don't forget to hit apply and OK. I always do that and close the thing, and then it doesn't work. So when you're applying materials, some materials are easiest to just use the paint bucket. And if you remember, if you go over here to the Modify tab, here's the paint bucket. Don't forget, by the way, there is a Remove Paint button too, which can be handy. So some objects don't paint terribly easily. One that comes to mind is going to be this little strip in the middle of our roof profile edge there. And the reason I know that is because we can define the material of this fascia by choosing edit type, and then you can just pick the material here. And what's cool about that is we could pick, let's pick plaster blue. That was the blue that we were using. Apply and OK. We might want to duplicate that material because we might want to make it different when we get to Lumion, but we can always change it later. But you see how I can't paint this middle piece. Now I have to use the paint bucket. Click on the paint bucket, and let's just use white. And now I should be able to click on these individual surfaces and kind of neaten them up. And you'll want to go all the way around the building and make sure that you get all of the surfaces painted. So that's where the paint bucket is really the handiest, is when you want to change individual surfaces like that. The other place where the paint bucket is super handy is when you've used the split face tool. And if you don't remember, the split face tool allows you to split a wall or other flat surface, just create a little sub-region within that overall wall. So I'm going to split this roof surface here and come over here. And you do have to kind of click on the face of the roof. And you see it gives you a highlight of that roof. Maybe I'll make this hidden line so it's a little easier to see. And now I could draw in, maybe I'll draw in a little box on the roof for some kind of roof hatch. Click the checkbox. So now I have a little sub-region that I can paint any material I want. So the old paint bucket comes in handy. Maybe I'll use the plaster interior, so it's a little different. And then you can make that area a different color than the rest of the roof. If I go back to realistic, you should see it's a different material. But really the best way to apply materials is through the properties of the family. So for example, if we select this roof and we choose edit type, we can edit the structure And in there, you can just apply a material. So I think I've already created a roof material. Yeah, I've created a roof material. Again, having the underscore so it shows up at the top of the list is awfully handy. Apply and OK. And there you go. I've painted basically all of the roofs that material because I was changing the family type. This one should have the same one. Something like this site, we masked this site using a component in place. That's a little more tricky. You actually have to double click on the site, select the object, and here is where you'll see the material. Now, if you want to see a trick, we can make a parameter for this material. So, I mean, I could just come in and pick one, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to associate a family parameter, and I'm going to make a new one, and I'll just call it material. And I'll even make it an instance parameter, which makes it a little easier to change because I only really have one instance of this, and they're all going to be the same anyway. And click OK and OK. So now, and I'll finish the model here. Now, when I select this family, up here in the properties shows up this material, and it becomes much easier to change. In general, it's better to change any component in place or standalone components. You can make these parameters and then change the materials in the original model. So I'll call this, I don't know what I call this, concrete slab is fine. Okay, and you want to find different concrete for different parts of the project. I can do the same thing for this material. I'll just show you the difference between a type and an instance parameter. If I do the same thing, I come in here and I say, oh, I'm going to be Mr. Stylish and make a new parameter, and I'll call it material again. But this time it was a type parameter. If you took a look at that menu, it's a type parameter. And finish the model. Now, in order to change the material, it doesn't show up in the properties. I have to go and edit type. The advantage of this is if I have more than one sidewalk, they will all change to whatever material I apply. Here we go, concrete sidewalk, and apply, and OK. And so that would be great for something like the curbs, or roadways or things like that. So your mission is to apply materials to all of the different aspects of your project, either by applying it using the paint bucket or applying it using family parameters. Finally, something like a door. If you double click on the door, there may be, not double click on the door, but sorry. If you go to the family parameters here, you may see some of the, you may see some of the materials that show up here. You just have to make sure you know what you're painting and where you're, if it's the style or the door. I think actually I need to replace this door with these double doors. I never got around to that. So there you go. I've got my homework. Now, there are a couple of instances of things that are going to be a little tricky to change, that you can't find the properties, the materials buried in the properties. I mean, even things like mullions, you can come in here and you'll find the material hidden in the menu. One is object you've imported, right? Obviously, those you got them from SketchUp, and you cannot paint them in Revit. No matter what you do, you could try exploding them and other things. The other thing that's always a headache are railings. So railings, if we choose edit type, we are going to be a little miffed here because there's no materials. Okay, where do we even look? Well, start by looking at the rail structure. Okay, and you'll see that the rail structure, this is the horizontal pieces. This is where their material is, and you can come in and swap it out just like we've done before. So that's great. The balusters, those are the vertical pieces. Oh, this is easy. I'll go in here and the material will be in here and it'll be easy to change. Well, good old Revit, I don't know why Revit does it this way, but this is the way Revit does it. It does not allow you to change the balusters in this menu. It's almost like they're taunting us. So the way you change these balusters is, one, you have to remember what the baluster name is. Baluster square 1:1 inch number 2. And then if you want to change that, let's just cancel out of this, you have to find that family in the project browser. So I'm going to go over here in my project browser. There's a little link that will jump me down to the families link. And I'll scroll down in the railings. So here we go, railings. Okay, I highlighted it so I can find it. And I think it said square one. Okay, let's find that. And there it is. You say, okay, well now how do I change the material? Just right click on this listing here and choose type properties. And here in the type properties menu, way down at the bottom, is the baluster material. Wasn't that easy? You know, why Revit does it this way, I think it has to do with the nested families or something like that, or type properties versus instance properties. You know, honestly, I have no idea. That's way beyond my pay grade. All I know is that is probably one of the hardest things to paint is these elements here, the railings. Everything else you should be able to paint it either directly or by assigning some kind of type parameter. And for things like these roadways, I would not recommend just paint bucketing it. And the reason is because there's often surfaces, like on this sidewalk, there's a front surface, and you want to make sure that the whole thing gets painted. So go through and set up those parameters and get everything painted for next time.